If you grill it, he will come.
Hey.
Hey.
Is this heaven?
Nope. It's fairway.
A fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with Unleaded 88.
Chris Hassel, Andrew Downs. It's time for Instant Iowa. Immediate analysis and reaction presented by Fairway Meat and Grocery. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Can't we ever just have a normal game? Just a game where you're like, yeah, there's not much to talk about. Didn't happen today for the Hawkeyes against Troy. Welcome to Instant Iowa. I am Chris Hassel. He is Andrew Downs, back after having his colon massaged last week. Good to see you up and at 'em once again, Andrew.
Yeah, man.
It's a 38-21 victory for Iowa as we jump right into Instant Iowa, presented by Fairway Meat and Grocery here in the Channel Seed Studios. Look, if you just see the score, you look at the stats, you might be like, okay, whatever. But you're like us and you watch the game. And you saw, I think the most concerning thing is Iowa giving up monstrous plays. A couple of 60-plus yard touchdown passes, just an inexplicable punt return for a touchdown. And yeah, it's a win. But Andrew, there's more questions than answers at this point as we head into the Big Ten season.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and we'll get to all that. But hey, this was a win, and at halftime it didn't feel like that. Again, I'm not going to try to make this something it isn't, but in heaven there is no beer, right? And I got some Confluence right here. We're gonna crack this baby open.
That's your first beer in how long?
This is my first beer in about 3 months. And
3 months. You know
what?
what?
It's a downtown throwdown.
Cheers. You deserve it.
And the Hawks just scored a big win. Now, they didn't cover.
A big win. They scored a win. I'll give you that.
No, you're right. I mean, you're exactly right, Chris. The thing that this team has remained relatively successful on was defense that doesn't give up big plays and special teams that's almost flawless. When those things start to slip away and you are not confident in the offense, it starts to feel pretty grim pretty quickly. You start to look at the rest of the season. This was not a good Troy team. Now, they played well and good on them, and the young man who just had a crazy day was, hats off to him. But this was a bad Troy team. As you and Williams talked about on Two Guys all week, this isn't the team that won the Sun Belt the last couple of years and won double-digit games. And so to see Iowa struggle as much as they did against this team, it's concerning. There's no question.
Yeah, Devontae Ross had a couple of 60-plus yard touchdown grabs, also had the 70-plus yard punt return for a touchdown. Since you cracked into that, was it Downtown Throwdowns from Confluence? Is
yes,
that what
sir.
you're drinking? I do want to thank the Full Court Press family of restaurants and bars, which I know some of them serve some Confluence beers, especially over there at the Iowa Tap Room. 100 Iowa craft beers on tap. They also have all the German beer you could ever ask for over at Hessen House, and Fong's Pizza open till 2 a.m. every night. So I want to thank them for being a sponsor here on Iowa Everywhere and Instant Iowa. What would you say your biggest takeaway from this game moving forward is going to be?
Man, I guess the biggest thing is it seems like they've at least decided to include Brendan Sullivan a little bit in the game.
I liked that adjustment.
I do think is a big thing, even though he didn't get a lot of plays. He didn't do a whole lot. He had that really nice play, but I agree. I like that adjustment, and it feels like something that's going to happen regularly moving forward. At least it's, Kirk Ferentz doesn't play at things like this, right? And we saw it happen. I think it really solidified the second time when Cade McNamara had just hit Weegan for that 33-yard play, probably the most vertical play Iowa had through the air
probably
all day.
Cade's biggest throw of the day.
Absolutely, and then he gets pulled right away, and that tells me, like always, Iowa is rigid, and they've made a decision that Brendan Sullivan is their at least red zone quarterback, maybe within 10 yards.
Yeah, maybe the first and goal quarterback.
Yeah, that could be a way
we
to
only
put it.
saw him when they had first and goal inside the 10.
Yeah. But I think that's my biggest takeaway. I guess I trust Phil Parker to get the defensive thing figured out. Maybe not fully. That this may not be the defense we all thought it was going to be coming into the season. But I'm not super worried about that. You had a guy have a big day today. The special teams, I think at the very least, we have to realize that we're human to some extent. We're vulnerable in that area. It's not the take for granted elite level special teams that we've come to expect the last couple of years. That's just not what it is right now. And so you have to find something offensively to find any success this season. And so far, that 1st and 10 Brendan Sullivan quarterback has been pretty good.
I think if you were to look at this offense on paper 3 weeks in and go back and show that to yourself a month ago, you would have said, "What? Holy shit. We're putting up those kind of numbers on offense." I mean, you look at the box score today, and they once again put up big numbers, 462 total yards. They rushed all over Troy, 284 yards on the ground, and that's obviously been the key to the offense. You look at Cade's numbers, not terrible, 19 for 23, great completion percentage, 83%, 176 yards, but he didn't throw a touchdown, didn't throw an interception, and there were a couple plays he really left out there. A terrible miss on 3rd down and short early in the game when Luke Lachey was wide open in the end zone, and then Iowa ends up turning the ball over on downs. They weren't having as much success running the football early, but that eventually came with Caleb Johnson again having a huge day, 25 carries, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think my biggest takeaway, though, is just going to be this Iowa defense and special teams isn't at the level that we are used to seeing it.
Right.
There's no more Torrey Taylor. There's no more Cooper DeJean on punt coverage and punt returns. Weegan muffed a punt, which could have been disastrous.
Wow,
if
John
Nestor
Nestor
wasn't there
with
to
a
recover
huge effort play there, too. I mean, he was behind both those guys when he made that dive. That was big.
Dakin is still
he's a
leaving
freshman.
some kicks to be desired. Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, that was a really bad punt. That punt was inexplicable, if you ask me, when you look at the time and situation. There was a minute 15 to go in the first half. Troy didn't have any timeouts. I'm telling them, just punt the ball out of bounds.
Yeah,
they
right.
have no timeouts. You're relying on that defense, but that defense as well, giving up big plays, 2nd straight week. Last week it was a 75-yard touchdown. This week, multiple 60-plus yard plays. And while the offense is putting up bigger numbers and clearly is better than last year, I'm worried that the sum of the defense and the special teams is going to bring this team down lower and keep a lot of other teams in the game moving forward, because it's on now. I mean, it's a trip to Minnesota and then Ohio State, and boom. And you got to win that Minnesota game.
100, absolutely, yes. No, there's no question. And you had talked a lot about, man, just the 90th best offense, right? But
99th best offense,
right,
is what I asked for. They're going to be, I don't know, 60.
But that's assuming,
50?
right, a top 5 defense, a top 5 special teams unit, and that's the problem. Is we're not seeing that right now, and so you need to be better than that on offense. And Cade needs to be better than he was. Yeah, his completion percentage is good, and his numbers aren't bad. A lot of missed opportunities you had the tweet that I saw that really pointed out the Lachey miss in the second quarter.
And it's right in front of Cade. I mean, right there. It's not like it was on the other side of the field.
And
it is right in front of him.
It's those antsy feet. It's not planting, not getting set, throwing off your back foot. It's the seemingly being afraid of getting hit or much contact, not trusting his legs. I thought he didn't get a very good spot on that 3rd down run, but that's neither here nor there. he just doesn't look like he has the confidence. And we've talked before about how mentality is such an important thing for this guy, especially. He hasn't really had that swagger since halftime of the Iowa State game. He certainly didn't have it for most of the day-to-day. Now, a lot of the horizontal passing, like get more vertical, especially early in the game. The thing I really wanted to see out of this game, because it's against Troy, was let's try some things. Let's stretch out these wide receivers. Let's get a little chemistry built between these guys. It was good to see Lachey get involved more often than
took too long, though.
It really did.
I expected them in either the first drive or the second drive, make it a point to get it to Lachey.
Absolutely.
He didn't get the ball until, was it late in the first half? They finally found Luke Lachey
and then
on
found him
back-to-back
couple
catches.
of times in a row, right?
And that's right before they gave up that 77-yard punt return on the low kick.
How Caleb Brown only has one reception in this game is,
and that was late.
Criminal. That was very late. I mean, you need to get these guys involved in the game. I liked how they used Jake McGill. He looks like Iowa's best wide receiver right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you had an opportunity here because, as you said, you go to Minnesota next Saturday night. You're not going to be able to mess around and try things out. Like, you need to have this figured out, and I really don't think they do, and that's worrisome.
Well, now they've lost their kind of preseason exhibition time to try to get Brendan Sullivan up to game ready, because he was out there taking snaps, and that went down as a pass for a touchdown, but he really has no meaningful snaps between the 20s. I do like what they did. Like, I'm not complaining that they put Sullivan in there. I wanted to see him more. I was hoping that
that's the thing. If you trust him enough to give him the ball on the goal line like they did, and really put it into his hands, it felt like he had a couple of options on a few of those plays down there, and rightfully so. If you trust him that much, you don't give him even a series between the 20s during a game like this.
And I knew they wouldn't.
I did too.
Frankly, I'm surprised they even put him in that.
The only reason I'm not, shout out to Chad Lysico from Legends and Listeners here on Iowa Everywhere. He texted the Hawk Central text group right before the game. Hey, I think we're going to see Brendan Sullivan earlier than a lot of people think. And so that's the only reason I was like, okay, there's something worked out here. And it's rigid. It wasn't like, if Cade's not playing well, we'll throw him in. They had some sort of a plan going into this game. And I hope we see that against Minnesota as well.
Appreciate everybody tuning in and commenting on our live stream here.
I'm still getting
Iowa.
used to this, all the video and all of this. I feel more comfortable this week than I did 2 weeks ago. That was my very first Iowa Everywhere broadcast, the Instant Iowa show. And man, it felt like things. I was like standing on a highway. I'm so used to the radio thing, and the video and the comments coming in. It really is a lot to kind of take in. So I'm paying a little more attention to the comments now. I feel a little more comfortable. We'll throw some up here at some point. But
I want to throw one up right now because a lot of fans are writing in about what the announce crew and TV broadcast team pointed out in this game several times. Is Cade McNamara not using the laces on some of his throws, and it wasn't just one throw; it was at least 2 to 3 throws. And I tried looking from each and every play, every time he threw it. It's impossible to tell unless you get a low angle look or a really zoomed in look. But I asked my friend Brady Quinn, who was a Heisman finalist back in the day at Notre Dame, about this, and because I didn't want to criticize it if that's something that maybe some quarterbacks like to do that for a particular reason, or if it's really humid out there and his hands are slick. Brady just said that it should not be done unless it is a really quick pass, like a quick screen, that you should always put your hand on the laces. And Spencer Tillman pointed it out several times. Brady said Cardale Jones used to do this. It worked out pretty well for Cardale Jones at Ohio State, but not throughout his NFL career, and he's not really known as a great throwing quarterback. But he basically just said that's not something that is taught. That's not something that Cade McNamara should be doing. And thinking back to the play, and this, you put a tweet, I think it was from Heavens.
Yeah.
That Cade McNamara has his hand not on the laces. I think it was an attempted screen. I don't think it was a really fast screen, though. I felt like he had time to get his hands on the laces. So I'm sure that'll be a topic.
It's just so weird.
Either
it's
after the game
bizarre.
or later this week. It's
another thing where it's like this is probably putting too much on it, but it's a little bit of like Iowa's offense is just always a national joke.
Yes.
And this would just be like another thing where it's
Look
like,
at the way he's holding the football.
the
No
quarterback-
wonder he sucks.
And I mean, it's so ironic that Kirk Ferentz's first suspension is going to be to illegally recruit a quarterback who ends up not being very good.
Yeah,
A quarterback
many
who,
of us
who
want
probably
to get benched.
who probably hampers the team in his
Yeah,
senior
where are you
season.
at right now with I feel I'd love to run a flash poll right now. I'm not sure how we can do that on the live stream, but I know early on in the game, especially after Cade missed Lachey wide open, the majority of Iowa fans were calling for Brendan Sullivan. And we did get to see him a little bit inside the 10-yard line. But the bottom line is it's just not going to happen. So do we even put the time and the energy into talking about why we think Brendan Sullivan should be the starting quarterback right now when we know full well Cade McNamara is going to start at Minnesota and he's going to start at Ohio State, barring injury?
I mean, it's the same thing year in and year out, right? This is the age-old problem with being a Hawkeye fan is exactly, you know exactly what you're going to get. We know exactly what Kirk Ferentz is going to do.
Do you
We've
think
done
he
this
should
over
bench
and
Cade
over again.
McNamara and start Brendan Sullivan next week? If you had it your way. And we ran a poll at Iowa Everywhere early in the game, 1,500 votes. 89.5% of you say yes, I'm
If
ready to
only,
see Brendan
and
Sullivan.
See, again, this is we're going to be broken records just like everybody else is talking about this because it's the same thing every year. If only to see something different, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
You want Brendan Sullivan to start because it's different than Cade McNamara. We feel like we know what we have in Cade McNamara. We felt like we knew what we had in Spencer Petras, so we wanted to see somebody else start. We felt like we knew what we had in, pick out an Iowa quarterback from the last 15 years. It's, as you said, is it even worth talking about what we want to happen? What do we actually think is going to happen? As you just said, Cade McNamara will start against Minnesota, barring injury.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see Brendan Sullivan.
I do too.
I'm not convinced Brendan Sullivan is a much better quarterback. I liked what I've seen out of him so far. He looks pretty confident out there at the very least. But I want to see something different.
I do too. And I think Cade, even though he was very efficient today, didn't turn the ball over. He missed plays, and he's just leaving a lot out there. And he doesn't give you any mobility, which is why Sullivan is playing on goal-to-go situations, because the defense has to account for Sullivan. That's why that was a smart move. You all of a sudden have a quarterback that you have to account for, and even if he doesn't throw it, it at least makes the defense think that you might be doing something else. And it worked both times. Both times they put Sullivan in, Iowa scored touchdowns, and that's what they were really having problems with last week against Iowa State. But the bottom line is, if they keep giving up these big plays, it's not going to matter who the quarterback is. Like, I want to have faith that the special teams will turn around and the defense will turn around. And look, the defense at times was great today.
Yes.
The defense at times was great against Iowa State.
The defensive line played well at times.
But, man, you can't keep giving up these explosives. I was listening to Nick Saban this morning on College Game Day, and he was talking about how he hated, I believe the term he used was big little teams. And he was talking specifically about how he hated teams of his that would make some huge plays, but would also give up huge plays.
Yeah.
Or he referenced the offense. He hated teams that they would go 80 yards in a blink, but then they would have 10 plays where they didn't do anything. And the same thing can be said defensively. I mean, you can be really, really good and flashy for 8 plays, but if you give up a 75-yarder on the 9th play, then it doesn't matter, and it's hurting you more than it's helping you. I don't get it. I mean, TJ Hall was beat like a drum twice. And I don't know if either of those plays had any sort of safety help that was supposed to be over the top, but they looked like carbon copies of one another.
They did.
I shit you not.
Yeah.
I shit you not. I'm sitting on my couch. I watched that play that
Yep.
Troy hits to cut it to 3 in the third quarter, and I look at my remote, and
I thought it was a replay.
did I go back in the game? Is this the same play from earlier? It was the same thing.
100%. And to the point, after the second one, at some point they did show a replay, and I'd been like looking on my phone on Twitter, and I looked up and I was like, oh my God, it happened a third. And then it was like, oh no, this is a replay. Because you're exactly right. It was the exact same play. And the punt return looked a lot like it too. Not that they were the same in any way, but just down that same sideline, all 3 of those touchdowns beyond 50 yards and just daggers. And yeah, TJ Hall, you see him in this picture just getting absolutely smoked. We saw Wampa get smoked against Iowa State.
Yeah.
It's just,
And he didn't look good on that punt return for a touchdown. I don't know if he took a bad angle, but
you're
it
right.
looked like he was running
It
in
looked like it was
quicksand
his, yeah.
to the edge.
it looked like it was his edge. And that,
But-
you're right. That punt was low and it wasn't great, but
Hey, talk to Notre Dame. They lost to Northern Illinois as a 28-point favorite. Iowa as a 23.5-point favorite, trailing at halftime, comes back to beat Troy 38-21. This is Instant Iowa. Chris Hassel and Andrew Downs, presented by Iowa Corn. Fill up with unleaded 88 E15 gasoline. Thanks to the folks over there at Iowa Corn for being a major sponsor of Iowa Everywhere and everything we do here, including Instant Iowa. Anything else, Andrew, that stood out to you about that game? Have we talked Caleb Johnson
this
yet?
is the thing. Exactly.
Oh!
It's Caleb Johnson. We've buried the lead. We both came into this with too negative of a thing, because you're exactly right. I just realized that. Like, we haven't talked Caleb yet. What a game. What a stud. I mean, what a grown-ass man he is, carrying piles, sliding through gaps that don't exist previously, and then the effortless nature with which he runs, at least it looks, it's gazelle-like. I mean, it's fun to watch. When he breaks one open, he's so fast, but he doesn't look so fast, and it's fun. He's a tall runner. He hits those holes, and man, he is such a difference maker.
He was breaking some tackles today, too.
Exactly.
Falling
He was,
forward.
yeah, carrying piles, right, moving the chains. And I mean, at times I did not want to come into this game seeing Caleb Johnson have a big day, not because of anything about him, but I wanted to see this offense pass the ball a little bit and show that they could. But it's very nice to have that backstop when your offense isn't doing well, when you need some momentum back, and you just hand it to number 2, and he carries you to wherever you need to go. It's been incredible. I saw somebody, he was suspended the first half of the first game. Somebody said he's got almost 100 yards per half in those 5 halves. I mean, it's early in the season, but like, if I was going to have a successful year, Caleb Johnson putting up 150 yards and a couple of touchdowns per game would get him to New York for that Heisman ceremony.
And he's been doing that each and every game so far. It's funny you mentioned how you didn't want to see him have a big game, because that was one of the key points going into this that I made on 2 guys earlier in the week, and one of the things I wrote down before the game that I wanted to see. I wanted to see what I didn't want to see. And what I didn't want to see was Caleb Johnson have to run the ball more than 15 times, because
Right.
I wanted to try to preserve him a little bit more for the Big Ten. He gets it 25 times, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he goes week 1, $119, 2 touchdowns and a half. Week 2 against Iowa State, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then today, 173 and 2 touchdowns. This guy is a bell cow back. Let's just hope that he can stay healthy, because look, some of the other running backs looked okay today too. It's Troy. It was late in the game. They were a little worn down. Jazz Patterson had a 39-yard touchdown run. But let's make no mistake, Caleb Johnson is the alpha, and he could be the best running back in the Big Ten. But they got to be able to throw the ball to keep defenses honest and not stack the box with 7 and 8 players.
And that's the problem. You see Troy doing that, right, in the first quarter, and you can't make them pay, and you're throwing horizontally. And again, Jacob Gill made a couple of nice catches, and they moved the chains a little bit. But Cade was inaccurate early in the game. And somebody in the chat was saying, hey, Cade's stats weren't bad today. And you're exactly right. We talked about that. But it's how did he play? How did it feel like he played, right? Like, how did he lead this team? And it was an issue. Caleb Johnson's fantastic. He's so much fun to watch. Jazz, as you said, had that nice kind of fourth quarter. You don't know how much stock to put into that. I saw John Miller talk about Kamari Moulton on Twitter, and it almost feels like his weight gets ahead of him, and he's almost like stumbling forward. And I thought that was an interesting observation. But Iowa does have a stable of running backs. They're going to need to use them all. They're going to need to give Caleb Johnson those breathers. But Caleb could have like a Heisman level season. We've seen how good he can be his freshman season, and he's off to a better start than ever this year.
Iowa wins it 38-21, coming back on Troy after trailing 14-10 at the half.
2-1, baby.
Hey, okay.
It's better than the alternative.
Look, that's where I had him at. I had him at 2-1.
Yeah,
I had them losing to Iowa
right.
State. This is right where I had Iowa. But I feel like right now that this team is closer to 8-4 than they are 10-2. Don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And that's a good way to put it, and that's a sobering way to put it. But you're absolutely right. 100%. Yeah. I wrote a note at some point, reevaluate the season. And I think I wrote that when it was worse than it ended up being. But that first half Troy team is a lot worse than most of the teams, than any team you're going to play.
Well, that's
from
the
here
thing.
on out.
They had a quarterback making his first FBS start. They had a head coach, and still do, that has never won a game before. He is 0-9 as a head coach, 0-3 at Troy, 0-6 when he was an interim at Purdue back in 2016.
A quarterback taking snaps from a center who had never played before.
Correct.
And they lost, at least two pretty major injuries, it seemed like, or at least guys out for the game early in that game. I mean, they suffered some injuries during that game. And so, yeah, you're not even talking about like a full caliber. Again, if this is the Sun Belt winning Troy team from the last two seasons, who's going to go on to win 11 games, you're like, okay, they had a lead at half, but we came back and won. And no, this is a bad football team. And it wasn't like a fluky lead that they had. That punt return was a little fluky, but Iowa just isn't very good. Right now. Now they get better throughout the season. Typically,
They usually do.
Stay healthy, and I mean, hope that Minnesota's not that good. I haven't seen Minnesota's game today. I saw the very first few minutes of it, but
Minnesota
but
was
then we
playing
started.
Nevada, and they were boat racing. No pun intended. Boat race Nevada. I believe that game is over now. Yeah, 27-0.
Okay.
So Iowa and Minnesota will both be 2-1. They will both have really tight losses to the lone power conference team that they played, Iowa to Iowa State, Minnesota to North Carolina, and bizarre, kind of, because both of those games were very similar. Minnesota missed a field goal late that would have won the game. Iowa State made a field goal against Iowa for the Hawkeyes to lose that game. Instant Iowa, presented by Freedom Tire, your home for new tires from every major brand, as well as vehicle maintenance and repairs, from preventative maintenance, major performance issues. Quentin Crowner and all those guys over there leading the team here in Central Iowa. Thanks for coming aboard. They're big on local businesses, and as you know, that's what we are so big on as well here at Instant Iowa and Iowa Everywhere. Find Freedom Tire near you. Altoona, Ames, Fleur Drive in Des Moines, West Des Moines, and on Hickman and Urbandale, or visit freedomtire.com.
Sing the song, Chris.
Freedom, freedom, freedom tire. Bow, 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 bow.
Fantastic.
It's probably some kind of copyright infringement that I made up. Because as far as I know, that's not their jingle.
We'll see if YouTube dings us.
Oh, God.
Marco says, what if Cade has a bad game next week? And we talked a little bit about this, but like, how bad do you think it would have to get to actually see Brendan Sullivan, take over for a game or even take over the starting spot? Short of injury, like what would have to happen against Minnesota?
I think it would have to be multiple turnovers and you're down multiple scores. I'm envisioning how bad it had to be for Ferentz to bench Spencer Petras in that Ohio State game a couple of years ago that they lost like 51-7 or something. I think it would have to be catastrophic as far as anything short of an injury. Obviously, it's good to see Cade has taken some hits and he's been okay. I was a little worried. He took a couple of big hits in that game, but he stuck it out. He stayed in there. Again, he was not the biggest problem. But
No.
quarterback could be the most fixable problem if Brendan Sullivan is the option that we think he is, the dual threat option, and a guy who might have a little bit more confidence in his throws. I mentioned the stuff that I wrote down before the game that I wanted to see. And obviously one of those things did not happen. Caleb Johnson touched it 25 times instead of 15. I wanted to see Cade hit several deep balls. It didn't happen.
Didn't even really attempt them. I mean, his arm strength seems to be an issue as well.
Major issue.
I mean, I know you guys talked about it last week, but he couldn't get the ball to the end zone on that Hail Mary. Again, I don't expect that to be a touchdown or anything against Iowa State late in the game. Like I don't. You're not expecting that to.
But my God, you got
a Big Ten quarterback has to get the ball to the end zone. He underthrew Caleb Brown badly, which should have been a touchdown. And now you wonder, does he even have confidence in his arm to try to throw it deep? It's probably more dangerous if he can't make it down. At least Nate Stanley overthrew guys by 15 yards.
He had too big of an arm.
You can't underthrow guys like that. That's how you get picks. That's how you lose games.
He only had one throw for more than 20 yards. It was that 33-yarder to Weegan that set up one of those touchdowns.
Good to get him going in the offense. Good to see him.
Finally he makes a
touch
catch.
The ball outside of. He seems like an explosive player, obviously, and so to get him the ball, that's the thing that Iowa just hasn't done a lot of, is get the ball to the guys who seem like your biggest playmakers.
Yeah, I mean, Lachey, he's still only targeted 3 times, caught 3 balls for 25 yards. I mean, you're targeting Ostrenga at least 5 times a game, and I don't know, maybe there's matchup reasons for that. I just
guys
don't
are
get
focusing so much on Lachey that it opens up Ostrenga, but
yeah, or you just have
but you
to
don't
have
find
Lachey
Lachey
hang back and
when
block
he's wide open in the end zone, right? Like, I mean, that's so seeing plays like that doesn't give you the benefit of the doubt that he's so well covered that we can't find him open. Well, what about on this play where he's alone in the end zone?
Hair Trigger makes a good point. One of those catches that Lachey made was at his feet. It was an incredible catch. That one, and I thought that the Weegan play as well. Weegan made a pretty good catch. Like, that was not a well-thrown ball. He was just wide open, and kind of the same thing with Lachey. I look at this next game, and obviously we have the whole week to talk about it on Iowa Everywhere with Murph and Andy and legends and listeners and 2 guys. This is a much bigger game in my mind now than it was before the season, because I feel like this is going to be the swing game. This is going to be the game where, hell, if they lose this game, then they're going to Ohio State next, and you're all of a sudden in an 0-2 hole in conference. You've already lost 2 rivalry games. Oh, it could get ugly. This is a really big game coming up, Andrew.
I agree completely. Yeah, it feels like a pivot game. Like
Plus, you don't have the pig. You lost it last year.
Yeah, so and you have like all that reason to go back and get revenge, right? You not only lost it, you feel like you shouldn't have, and so you got to go up there. Ferentz doesn't like Fleck. He doesn't make his feelings known about a lot of people in a negative way. Kirk Ferentz doesn't. The fact that he's treated Fleck the way he has over the years, and just, I mean, it's the way Kirk Ferentz talks shit. It's not like normal people do, but it's how he does, and he's done it enough that we know how he feels about PJ Fleck. We know how Iowa feels about that program. They have the "We Hate Iowa" chant. I mean, we know how they feel. This is a real rivalry. It's good. We've been the better team, and you're exactly right. This is a huge game. Are you a for real team? Can you turn this around? Were these games really just an outlier? Are you going to get better moving forward? And what do you have in the tank here? Because you're going to go into that bye week and gear up for one of the best teams in the country. So you lose this game, and all of a sudden you've lost 3 of your first 5. You're 2-3 after that Ohio State game.
Next week,
like it's a night game. It can all fall apart.
What network is that game on next week? I hope to God it's not the same crew that called today's game. I rarely publicly say anything about announcers because I know what the job is, but Eric Collins, the play-by-play guy, that's always been his thing. Like, he just goes nuts. But like, come on, there were a couple times where I was. I'm not going to say it. He was just a little bit too much. A lot too much. NBC is what it's on next week, according to some of our commenters. That was just not a very enjoyable game to watch. One, because Iowa gave up a bunch of big plays, and two, because of the the constant screaming.
And like, if you're not paying attention, you again, like I'm looking down at my phone or something, and I hear a scream. I'm thinking, oh, big play, like something big, and I look up, and it's like a 4-yard out. It's like, oh, what a catch by the tight end.
Oh God, I don't want to make a habit of bitching about the announcers, just like I don't want to do the same thing with refs after a game. That's just one of the things I try to stay away from. But I felt like this game today was a little bit different. You want to bring excitement and energy. I know that, but you can't just like completely explode. You got like one time you can explode. And you for the end of the game, you rev yourself up, and then when the crescendo, you explode. You don't explode like 25 different times in one game. But maybe he was just excited that he called an Iowa-Troy game, and Troy kept it so close and tight. That was a game for 3 quarters. But
it was.
Iowa comes out on top, Andrew. You got the sun shining on you now.
I know, right? It's the sun
right in your eyes,
perfectly.
You're having your first beer for the first
Since
time
like
in months.
Middle of June, yeah.
So
it tastes good, by the way. It tastes Confluence beer. It's good stuff.
Great stuff.
Could be
I've had some of
worse.
those when I've come
I
back.
had that bit kind of, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have my first beer. In heaven there is no beer. Hawks are gonna win. I'm gonna crack it on air. It's gonna be awesome. And then at halftime, it's like, oh man, this isn't gonna work. So I was just gonna pull one of these bottles off the shelf behind me and pour a big old fat glass of whiskey. But hey, I didn't have to do that. The Hawks won.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot like maybe there's been something every week. I mean, week one it was the horrific first half where we thought Cade was just done, and then all of a sudden he explodes in the second half. Week 2, obviously, I mean, just an absolute heartbreaker. And then this week you're losing at halftime and you're giving up all these plays. It's always something. I'm jealous of those Iowa State fans. They're sitting there. They've got a perfect record, and their team is on a bye.
And they got to watch Iowa struggle for the first half.
Yeah,
It was like maybe it was Kirk Ferentz's birthday present to Bloom. Was, hey, we're gonna not
Bloom's
look good
birthday
for a while.
It's Aiden's birthday. He's an Iowa State grad. Happy birthday, guys.
Aiden's awesome. I mean, what's your confidence level going into that Minnesota game?
Not.
What do you think the line's gonna be?
It's a good question. I'm guessing that there are some look-ahead lines,
like 2.5.
I think Minnesota might be favored in this game.
I think so too. They're at home.
2.5 would be a good call. Even though they lost that North Carolina game, I just see there's problems with every unit that Iowa has. Even when we had the worst offense in the history of college football, we didn't have. Not only did we not have issues on defense and not have issues on special teams, Iowa had the best special teams unit in the country.
Yeah.
One of the best defenses in the country. So they were both elite. But going into the Big Ten this season, there are problems with every unit right now. Now, I'm not saying they're not correctable.
Right.
Reese Dakin, I think, should get better. The field goal kicking from Drew Stevens has been good.
We should also point out Jamari Harris with that pick 6.
Oh, he's been fantastic.
He's been great. They pointed him out on the broadcast at one point, the blanket coverage he had. He had a couple of really nice plays, and then he had an almost pick in the first half, and then to get that pick 6. And that was one of those like quintessential Hawkeye pick 6s where they doughboys and they turn into an offense real quick, and they get that blocking, and they
it was those back-to-back drives. The one drive they had 3 straight TFLs.
Yep.
Crowd forces
drove
a
him
penalty.
back into that was awesome.
And then the pick 6, and
Ryan
I was
Allen
thinking,
drove the the running back all the way back.
But then I think it was the very next drive they give up another 60-plus yard touchdown throw. So, Kirk Ferentz, I'm sure he's going to be when he hits the podium
Phil Parker,
in a few
how
minutes.
Pissed must Phil Parker
they're
be?
going to be talking about.
He probably
got a lot
threw out
to
his
clean
shoulder.
up.
I bet Phil Parker is just giving it to these guys
after these last 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
He does
because this is what his. I mean, he hangs his hat. His entire legacy is he has defenses that don't do this. He has great defensive backs. They don't give up big plays. They never give up explosive plays.
And they were extremely motivated this week to get the taste out of their mouth from last week.
They got burned. They lost
feel
the
like
game
they
last
gave
week.
that up last
Absolutely.
week, even though I mean, there were way more factors than just
There
the
certainly
defense.
were, but between Wampa and then the Castro on the the final drive
Yeah.
to give up that 35-yard. I mean, they've been a liability, and that's the opposite of what we've always known them as.
Well, Andrew, again, thanks for joining me here, and I'm really happy that you're all put back together again.
All put back together. I've got 12 staples in my gut right now.
Your
You wanna-
new colon has
wanna see
never
something
seen
gross?
Iowa lose. No, that's not right.
No.
They saw Iowa lose
Yeah,
to.
unfortunately.
if your colon had eyes.
It was
would've
like the
seen that.
first. Yeah, it was like this is the first win for my new colon.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah. That was rough in the hospital, man.
I bet.
And then, like, I said this on Murph and Andy at some point. You know, I've done WHO radio sound off enough times after bad Hawkeye losses that I know, like, it's cathartic.
Yeah.
You
It
get
can
your
be.
emotions. You
It
kinda,
wasn't
you-
for
you
me
work
last
through
week.
it.
I don't know why it wasn't, but it
Yeah.
wasn't for me. But I feel like
So I do wonder
it
that
can
because
be for others.
Because I'm laying there Saturday night, and I like when a game like that happens, I don't even want to watch football. You know what I mean? Like I lose my love for the entire sport. I don't just want to not consume Iowa content. I don't care about football anymore. Like I turned that Bears game off halfway through the second quarter on Sunday because it was like, oh, I can't do this again.
And they won.
But a show like this, allows me to kind of work through the emotions a little bit, and probably the other way too. I'm not quite as high, after we talked about everything as maybe I would have. So thanks, you brought me down a little bit.
Hey, that's kind of what we're supposed to do. I bring
is.
you down a little
That's what-
bit. You bring me up a little bit.
That's what the picture shows. I'm smiling and you're frowning.
I think most fans are more down than they are up. After,
I think so.
After this performance.
And I think that's fair.
But all that matters is that Iowa got the win, and now we go into Big Ten play, hoping that they can clean this stuff up against
You got to
Minnesota.
fix it as you go. And I mean, at least you have the bye week after Minnesota. But you can't mess around this week. You go up there and play the way you have for most
Yeah.
of this season so far. I think we can say at this point, you're probably going to get beat.
Yeah, on the road in a rivalry game, gonna have to play a much, much better game in Minneapolis to get the old pig back. Andrew, thanks. We'll be listening to you on Murph and Andy this
Yeah,
week,
buddy.
beginning Monday afternoon. I'll be there with Williams for Two Guys on Monday morning. Of course, we'll have all the coverage leading up to that Iowa-Minnesota game coming up this week. Instant Iowa, presented by Fairway Meat and Grocery from the Channel Seed Studios. Iowa wins it 38-21 over Troy in a comeback win.